for me, and I think a lot of unspoken men, it's simply that watching 11 men face off against 11 men is super exciting, and the women's game is simply never going to replicate that same degree of tension, drama and excitement.
You mean because of the physicality of it, the fact that there's sort of, well, I won't say 11 hulking men because it's not rugby, but generally, you could argue that it's much more aggressive, much more physical, maybe, than the women's game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah, so they're not rugby players, as you said. It's not so much physicality; it's just the excitement. I'm speaking as a vanilla heterosexual male. The excitement of watching 11 men, athletes in their prime, against 11 men is extreme, and I'm just not gonna find that same level of excitement in watching the women's game. Even if the quality of football, you mentioned the worldies, etc. I mean, I'm sure that's all true, but it's just not gonna, in the broadest sense, turn me on. It just isn't.
But you described yourself as full-blooded heterosexual. I mean, I don't watch the men's game thinking of it in any sort of sexual way at all.
No, neither do I.
You clearly don't in the women's game. But I wonder why you even felt the need to say that.
Because I'm talking about the excitement of watching men face off against each other. It is exciting, and I want to make clear that it's not. There's no sort of erotic edge to that. It's simply exciting to see that the bravado. It would be the same in a boxing match.
Is it the potential for violence? Is that the attraction?
No, definitely not. It's what I'm saying that it is, that watching men face off against each other is exciting in a way that watching women face off against each other isn't.
Well, that is an interesting point, one which I must admit I hadn't thought of. Or do you think it's just we're used to it, and you get this effectively a new sport coming along, and we have to get used to it?
I don't think so. I mean, I would say that I would suggest that my point actually would hold water for. Would go a long way to explaining the difference in terms of lack of excitement. Would this have been the men's team having just reached the final?
Well, your point of view, like your two previous callers said. Now, myself and my son and people that we know, we go to both men's and women's matches. We actually go to them. Chelsea men, Stamford Bridge. Chelsea ladies, Kings Meadow. A number of the Chelsea ladies are actually in the England team, and obviously wonderful Sam Kerr, who you may not know, is the Australian captain. She's also a Chelsea lady, and we've met them many times, Iain. Many times after the matches, they come over, they speak to the fans, they sign, they speak. They even, a few of them even know my son's face. That's how often we go. But my point is that over the last few years, we've been going to the women's football. We have seen such a tremendous change in people coming, the atmosphere, the matches, the quality of games, obviously since Euros too last year.
Yeah.
Maybe the time difference does have some effect because obviously, the games are in the morning. But like your point is, why are we not going yippee, yippee, yippee? And so I speak to a lot of people, about sports. So we even got bets on, we have a laugh about it. One of my friends actually puts the phone down me when I rang him this morning because he's from Nigeria. He's still trying to get over it.
Dear.
No, in a joking way, kind of. He's at work, So my point is that when you speak to men about it, they sort of sneer a little bit, or they turn their nose up and laugh and like, oh no, I don't watch that. No. They like the men's football, like we do. We go to the live game. So we see it in action, Iain. Your gentleman that you just spoke to, Tamrid, he made some good points, but is he seeing the game in action like we are? We've seen it. We're there watching. And I can tell you the difference when I started going to the women's games was, I've seen it grow. I've seen it, it's so exciting. Alex Scott makes great comments. Ian Wright has always been behind it. The money wasn't there, but it's coming, Ian. The money is coming.
Well, I think it is. And I think there's a lot of commercial organisations are now seeing the potential for sponsoring women's football. And that could be the game changer. But how many people attend a Chelsea game, a home game?
Oh, it's grown tremendously. Sometimes it's in the early days, it used to be around maybe 2,000 to 3,000. And it's grown up and up and up to sometimes maybe around 30,000.
And do they ever get to play at Stamford Bridge?
They do actually. Specific games are played at Stamford Bridge, and they more or less, as time has gone on, they have more or less filled it. You would be very, very surprised. And Ian, listen to this: Wembley. I took my nephews and my younger one for the first time, nephew, who's only coming up to 5. And do you know how many people were there? Over 70,000 for the FA Cup Women's Final. The atmosphere. And let me just get something else in. You can't believe when you go to the games, if you're there, I will say, "Hi, Ian, how are you?" And you'll say, "Oh, Margaret, you're here." People all seem to know each other. And even at Wembley. But when you go to Stamford Bridge, apart from going with your own people, there's no communication.
I do not class female or women's football. It's a variation of football. I've watched it so many times, and my ex-partner, she used to play football, and I remember watching it 13, 14 years ago, the FA Cup final on telly, and it was at Bristol City's Ashton Gate, and oh my God, you've got a girl in goal flapping at a ball coming over her head. Females cannot play goalkeeper.
Why on earth not? Because
I've never seen a decent female goalkeeper. And I'm not sexist. I'm not this and that. It's, they want the same money like the tennis players do. But female tennis players don't play 5 sets that take sometimes 6-7 hours. But in tennis, they got the money. And the skill's not there. And I believe the American national team, who won a World Cup last time or the time before, they played like a youth team from an American team, and they got beat about 14-0. They're just not... don't get me wrong, females, women, young girls, it's not football. And all of this about, they don't roll about, crying every time they get tackled. Yeah, but they don't get hit by some, Neil Ruddock character, do they? If you know what I mean, Ian. I agree with everything you said, Ian.
You again, I'm going to be very careful here, but you never see a chunky woman footballer, do you?
Oh, Ian, I wouldn't have said that. Oh, my God.
Well,
there's no Adebayo I could fin with from Winter Wanderers, you mean?
Well, I do. And maybe you need a few characters like that to sort of get the excitement going a bit. Because, they all... I'm thinking of the players that I was watching today, and they are all, very, very athletic, if you see what I mean.
I as a Scotsman, I really hope England win it. But when I walk in a pub on Sunday night, if I've got all my English mates singing "Football's Coming Home" and blah, 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 I'll be tearing right into them because I just don't...
I think that's unlikely.
Said it's a man's game, Ian. I nearly said it's a man's game, but I won't.
You just did.
Yeah, there's a lot of sexist talk going on. In fact, I've just picked up my other daughter. If she'd have heard this conversation, although she's not into football, she'd have probably phoned you up as well and torn you guys off a strip. This is disgraceful. I've done sport at a high level myself. I used to play football at a pretty high level as well. My daughter was one of 250 people, young ladies, who was in academy football. She was playing against Man United last year. She played against Aston Villa WSL 1 team as well.
Wow.
So you can see, and she got her first England colleges cap and scored in that game last year as well, and the manager didn't want her to go. But that's another story. But that gives you an indication as to what my wife and I were watching. And my wife, by the way, as well, was in the British judo squad, and I'd won the British karate championship back in the 90s. So we know a little bit about sport and sporting performance and endeavour. And all I can say is you guys haven't watched it live. You really haven't, to see what's going on. Until you watch the Japanese side live and you see the kind of intricate football like what the best Spanish tiki-taka teams used to do. Then you watch, say, the Swedish team with the kind of European power that goes against that, and it's exactly the same. Then you go to all of the training sessions. My daughter used to, it shouldn't be controversial, she used to train at Tottenham Hotspur. So it was over in that brilliant facility just off of the A10 somewhere, and it was phenomenal. The pitches there, the staff, the way they were treated, the food, the training is exactly the same as the men. They do the same drills. Everything's the same. They're just women. Now, I watch a lot of athletics as well. I'd say I love watching Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price, and I actually think she was a better consummate professional than Usain Bolt, dare I say it. Well, because
controversial.
Well, because if you look at relative to her size and her performance, female performance, look at how consistently she's run, say, 10.7s. Usain Bolt was out eating chicken, going to parties. He was great. He's phenomenal. And my background is from Jamaica, so I'm not knocking him. He's done our country a lot of good. But the bottom line is she was a better professional. And relatively speaking, she was faster relative to him. 10.7 against the men's 10.5.9 is really good, and she was running that consistently. So we've got to just match like for like and not sort of talk about the difference in strength between a man and a woman, because Mike Tyson would destroy any female boxer in his prime, and also many men as well, obviously. So that's not a fair comparison to say, women's team plays a men's team and they get beat. I've seen those scores.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you on that. I just think that you're right. I haven't seen a live women's football match. I completely confess that. But I don't think it does. I've seen sort of matches on television, but it's not the same as being there live. You're absolutely right. But
I'll concede a couple of things, Iain. I'll concede that some of the shots from outside the area, they need to be worked on a bit there. And the other thing, that this is a biggie that needs to be sorted out in the women's game, is the ACLs. Women have got different gaits to men. So the way that the training is going at the moment, a lot of females are going down with ACL injuries. It's really, really bad. My wife's a physio, and she noticed it as well, because she's done some of the physio at some of these clubs that my daughter's played for as well. And for your team, West Ham, when Frank Lampard was there, he used to make cups of tea. I used to see him as well with Rio Ferdinand and all of those guys. So you might want to talk to her one day, because she could probably tell you a few stories.
Those were the days.
Yeah, but, women's football, I think we've got to give it its due. It's only because it was knocked back by the FA why it isn't where it should be right now.
Well, that's an interesting thing. That really is an interesting point that you're making there, because if you think about it, the Football Association, the Premier League, and all of the bigger clubs, if they'd wanted to, they could have been pushing women's football 20 years ago. They had the money to do it, but not the inclination. And if I'm honest, I'm not sure the inclination is there now in the FA. They mouth all the right platitudes, but if you look at the money that they're making, how much of that is going into the women's game? You look at some of the bigger clubs. Manchester United, they were very late to the party, weren't they? Only forming a women's team 3 or 4 years ago, and yet they're now they're one of the biggest women's clubs. But I want to see what happens down the lower end, where the likes of Bradford City or clubs in League One and League Two, when are they going? Some of them do have women's teams, but very few of them do. I think we'll know that women's football has really taken off when most of the 92 clubs have their own women's team. And I don't know how many it is at the moment, but I suspect it's less than a third.